makes me treat you the way that I do. Gee, baby, ain't I good to you?
I'm sorry to break this to you. Lowering taxes helps businesses because they have more money to hire people. Lowering taxes on the general public, just people, not small businesses or businesses, helps people have more money to buy goods. And who sells goods? No, not the government. No. The private sector. Businesses.
The main premise of supply-side economics is that tax cuts on the supply side, i.e. on those who invest in businesses and produce products and services, will stimulate the economy and pull it out of a recession. This is usually translated as tax cuts for the rich, and the influx of cash is supposed to trickle down to workers and consumers, the demand side. The supply-side tax cuts are usually coupled with tax cuts for middle incomes as well. But it's important to note that tax cuts for the investor class are the most important for supply-siders. If investors have more money to invest, they can create more jobs. This flies in the face of traditional fiscal conservatism, which aimed at balancing the budget. Cutting taxes in the midst of a recession is bound to increase budget deficits. The proponents of supply-side tax cuts often attach rhetoric about spending cuts to their sales pitch, but cutting government spending during a recession can cause serious problems. Reducing government spending when businesses and consumers have retracted their own spending will further dry up cash in the markets. It can send the economy into a deeper recession. The supply-siders had to find a way around this so that they could cut taxes and still satisfy the traditional fiscal conservatives. Enter the Laffer Curve, named after Arthur Laffer, its creator. According to the Laffer Curve, taxes above a certain tipping point will result in diminishing revenue. If that's true, then then cutting taxes could actually increase tax revenue. With the Laffer Curve, supply-siders could have their supply-side tax cuts and not worry about those pesky deficits. They could have their cake and eat it too. It was with these principles in mind that Ronald Reagan instituted his economic changes, which we now call Reaganomics. It included tax cuts, with the greatest cuts going to the wealthiest. Not only was spending not reduced, Reagan increased military spending as part of his Cold War strategy, and it was a strategy that worked, in my opinion. It was Reagan's greatest success. For an assessment of the results of Reaganomics, please see my long and boring video on the subject, which I will link in the sidebar. Let's look at some of the objections to supply-side economics. First, let's tackle the Laffer Curve. The problem is, the empirical data just doesn't support it. While the curve does correctly predict declining tax revenue at the extremes, as tax rates approach 0% and 100%, at the moderate tax rates Americans experience, other forcings have greater influence on revenue. This led Martin Gardner to create his Neo-Laffer Curve, which, though humorous, is more realistic than Arthur Laffer's idyllic original. No matter how you slice it, cutting taxes without cutting spending is a budget buster. There's a problem with cutting taxes as a stimulus. For middle incomes, a tax cut will only amount to a small percentage of what they make. This is unlikely to change their spending habits. It doesn't significantly increase their purchasing power. For the unemployed, who pay little or no taxes and are most hurt by recessions, tax cuts benefit them not at all. It's also questionable whether cutting taxes on investors will stimulate investing. If they look out and see a bad market where their investments are likely to be lost, having more money to invest is unlikely to entice them. In a recession, the market is just too risky. You can cut their taxes and cut interest rates to spur their investment, and they will kindly thank you and stuff the money under their mattresses. Now let's look at an alternative to supply-side economics. It is possible to stimulate the demand side. Before Reaganomics, the dominant doctrine in economics was Keynesian. named after John Maynard Keynes. According to Keynes, government could spend its way out of a recession by making up for the lack of private investment with public investment. People could be given benefits directly, or they could be employed in make-work jobs, or they could be employed by private firms working government contracts. The aim was to boost the purchasing power of the demand side. This form of investment could reach those most in need, the unemployed. It could give them the power to take care of themselves, and their increased purchasing power would boost the market for the goods and services they consume. Under these conditions, when investors look out at the market, they don't see high risk, they see people buying. They will then invest so they can get a piece of that pie, which creates jobs. Both supply-side and demand-side stimuli aim at getting private firms to hire. Keynesian economics doesn't try to replace private investment with government investment, but only to temporarily substitute government investment when private investment fails. Instead of trickle down, you prime the pump. Deficits will be higher, but they can be paid off when the country can better afford it, after the recession, when the economy is growing normally again. I'm not saying there are no flaws with Keynesian economics. I hold no ideological attachment to it, so I can't preach it as gospel. I only offer it as one of many alternatives to supply-side economics. Nick, I'm not going to ask you to change your opinion. Supply-side economics still has adherents who believe they can answer all of these objections, but any smart person will at least acknowledge that these legitimate objections exist and will have to address them. You don't have to agree with the alternative view that I present. Instead, I would like you to acknowledge three things. 1. The case for supply-side economics is not a slam dunk. There are reasonable objections to it. 2. There are alternative economic theories. You don't have to agree with them to acknowledge that they are out there. And 3. Alternative ideas are not from the lunatic fringe. All your opponents are not socialist, communist, fascist, or whatever other name you want to call them. If you can acknowledge these things, even if you don't change your mind on economics, you will have taken a big step. Thanks for watching, Nick, and please, in some way or other, let me know that you did watch this video. And let's continue this. Let's continue it as a dialogue, not a monologue. Again, thanks for watching. This is Brian Tulsa. Please read books.
Bought you a fur coat for Christmas, a diamond ring, a Cadillac car, and everything